Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Tales of the Walking Dead, Season 1, Episode 4. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I don't think they ever actually say his name in the episode. I don't think he ever says it. I think it's just in the title of the episode, but Dr. Everett. It's so interesting because he kind of reminds me of like the opposite spectrum of like Al. I mean, Al was, recording people, like her videos and everything were people related, whereas Dr. Everett is focusing on the dead, the Homo mortis, which is so interesting. We don't always get this scientific approach for things. Obviously, a big chunk of that is, but even, I'd say, World Beyond kind of dived into it more, but like studying them in the same capacity is so, because even then we never really got this fully know the ins and outs of all their research, the CR's research, but we get a little bit here and there, but kind of getting this documentarian style approach. And the moment we kind of got introduced to Everett and he was watching Amy and was like, well, he's not going to interfere. That's why he was watching for so long, because I was like, yeah, he's just going to let you die, because it's like, right, you got to let nature run its course, because he sees the dead, Homo mortis, as part of nature, and it's he's here documenting it, understanding it, and doesn't want to interfere. He did bring up some really interesting points. Like one of his subjects, he talked about her having like very acute like hearing. So like out of any of the like the zombies that are in the walkers or chompers, as Amy later calls them, in the pack, in the herd, she's the one that kind of reacts first to any like auditory like sensory sensation. So I wonder if that's almost supposed to be indicative of not just her as a walker, but that could just be indicative of maybe just as a human she had a very acute sense of sound, and so obviously it applies and is applicable in the case of her being dead as well. So but yeah, once again, he wasn't going to interfere, but the only reason why he saved Amy is because she destroyed the transmitter that was on the one he keeps an eye on the most, and that is Subject 21, which when they actually did eventually get talking, Amy was like, he's got to be someone important to you, which he was. He used to be someone, his name was Dr. Mosley. He was a part of the research group that Everett was a part of, because we never found out what actually led them to go their separate ways, but all he said was like basically they had different opinions about things. What that necessarily meant, who knows? But he's definitely someone that's been cut off from humans for so long. But it's like, so for him, it's like, I've got to do my research because science above everything else. That's all that matters. Nothing else matters. So I've got to do my research because, my research is all this. It's almost kind of a little Eugene-ish, except it's not BS. Whereas like Eugene like said all this crap about like being able to make a cure. That was his way to survive. Everett's more so like not even coming at it from a perspective of, he's not coming at it from the perspective of trying to find a cure for it. It's just like no, we need to understand this. That's the only way we're going to survive because we learned so much from the dead. Especially the area he's living in, he calls it the dead sector, which I'm like, I don't think that's been a place that we've ever really known. I'm curious. There's so much we don't know in this story of like, well, where is this exactly? Where is the dead sector? Because like there's like a man-made like crevice that kind of separates the dead sector from the outside. So that's why like Amy's here, because her group wants to come here and try and rebuild society here. And I do think that's such an interesting perspective that we end up having with Everett and Amy, where Everett's kind of very disconnected from humans, kind of believes humans are kind of trash. It's like, yeah, like why are humans want to come here and rebuild? Nature had its basic massive correction course of like, we were leading this planet down this path and nature needed a hard reset. And that's where Homo mortis comes into play. And what we're going to do, humans want to take, and you're just going to make the same mistakes. Whereas Amy's like, right, I have a lot more faith in humans. But he's like, right, so what, even if you can like find a way to balance out with nature, what does that mean going forward? The fact is that you might have learned, but what about the next generation or the generation after that? And also, we're talking about one group. What about another group? We've seen time and time again in this universe, not every group can coexist and has the same beliefs. Not everyone can fall in line, because there will always be someone else being like, no, we're not going to do things your way. We're going to do things our way. So it's interesting. I guess it's very philosophical, which is so interesting because, there is that logical versus moral conundrum that's kind of going on here of like these two, once again, the scientific and the more moral and angle to all of this with these two characters and how they view the world, how they view everything. And because I think why Everett really latched on to Amy is because, well, he finds out like, oh, well, you're intellectual, you're not. She's like, yeah, I can read, I'm not an idiot. But for him, it's just he's been so. I mean, we don't know. Because we find out later on that Amy was right, that number 21 was someone important to him. Now, I mean, we don't know how close they were, but he made a promise to Dr. Mosley, like, hey, don't kill me when I die and come back, like, study me. Like, I could be a great research point for you. And that's why he's so important, because it's like, right, this research is kind of everything. We made this deal together, and now they're all kind of scattered because we have no idea where the rest of those researchers are. I mean, for all we know, some of them might have gotten snatched up by the CR, which isn't completely out of the question. So, but also just, the terrible nature of, yeah, it isn't just the dead that will get you, because Mosley ended up dying from cancer. It's just like, yeah, I mean, I guess that also flows into the nature of things of like, right, if it wasn't for modern medicine, like, I mean, even with modern medicine, sadly, people die from cancer, but at least it helps them live even longer. So it's like, so it's like, I'm sure probably even from Everett's point of view of like, oh, that was also nature, because without the human interference, like the human body just naturally, we would die or whatever, Because he was also pointing out stuff about Specimen 21 when he was like, yeah, like he was very cognizant of the rest of the herd, that basically twice, or at least he mentioned one time with a dog, maybe the other time was with the dog as well, but he killed the dog, but rather than eating it, he left it for the rest of the pack. So there's something there. And maybe on some level this has something to do with the shift in the dead that I still have not finished Walking Dead. I'm going to catch up to that, but that was something that was started in World Beyond. We do see trickle over into that trickled over into Walking Dead's final episodes, was like the dead started shifting and evolving. So maybe there's something here in that capacity. Maybe not. I mean, that dynamic that Everett and Amy have, yes, it's very unique to this very episode, but it is a pattern that we kind of seen time and time throughout these episodes, is like people from two different circumstances and situations butting heads, and they've just had more positive outcomes, kind of, with the exception of episode 3. It's like episode 1 and 2, there were some unlikely pairs that came together and ended up making things work, whereas like episode 3, that's not the case, and in this case, it wasn't either, because they weren't fully compatible, even though like Everett was like, oh, like I need someone to take over my research when I eventually grow old and die, and you're smart, you could stay here, because once again, he didn't want any humans there, but it's also, he got attached to Amy, he got to spend time with her, and when you've been isolated, all he had is his research, he's never had another human to communicate with for so long, now here's someone in his life, it changes things, Because once again, it's supposed to keep, his interference to a minimum, but the problem is he couldn't help it in this case, because if he really wanted to kind of cut ties with all like things, like when Amy was helping him track down Specimen 21 and she came across a group, if he really was going to not interfere, he would have let her do it. But it's also like, right, I don't want you to kill my subjects, but he also didn't want her to die because he wanted her to stay alive because he came to like her. It's like, oh, you're the first human I've kind of come to care about in a very long time. Like I said, like we don't really how close him and Mosley were, but at least, you were there by his side. He even says like Mosley also gave you a second chance at life because you had kind of given up. And I guess maybe on some level, Amy could have been like, because Amy was kind of his restoration, like belief in humanity to some extent, but sadly that just wasn't enough. And Amy was trying to protect her friend Hannah. And, but all Everett cared about, it's like, oh, he was trying to protect Amy from going over there. It's like, right, your friends are already dead. I don't want you to die. But then, like, when he wants to get Subject 21, she's like, what is wrong with you? You're like, you're so hypocritical because you want me to help you when it comes to what you want. Like, you're constantly twisting the rules to fit what you want. It's like, you didn't want to help my friends. You wanted to leave us to get eaten, but now you want me to help you get your subject, which is kind of a moot point now because he's dead now. Because, well, not just like dead, but like he ended up getting eaten by an alligator. So it's like kind of poetic. It's just nature playing its role. So he was kind of upset by it, but I think he also kind of understood it at that time as well. So. But because he knew enough research about everything, he knew exactly what was happening. He told he told Amy, like, hey, you and your people should not be here. Don't try to settle here. Because he had shown her a video of, like, all the footage he had documented that all the animals that had escaped from the zoo. It actually parallels very nicely with Sweet Tooth, if you've ever seen Sweet Tooth. It kind of delves very deeply into a same... I didn't even think about that, but... Because Everett's very much like, without getting into it so much, there's a certain character in Sweet Tooth that he's very much like, where there's a character that's very much all about nature. So I didn't even draw those parallels into it just now. She did not have the biggest faith in humanity either, but that started to change. So she definitely had a lot more faith in humanity than Everett did, and but yeah, he never told Amy, like, yeah, the reason why you should leave is because the migration pattern of that herd, like the fact that the Homo mortis that you killed and 21, they were going in the direction of a herd. See those birds flying around? They're gathered around because that means they smell death. They're waiting for food because it's like, right, so they're in your people are in its migration path. But Amy, it's like, I'd rather go there and die than stay here and end up like you. And Amy went back, found her way back to her people, and then we cut back to Everett, and things had changed for him. He didn't want to just stick around. Like, either he had just, maybe he had, when he came across the scene at the end of the episode, he seemed like, kind of like, oh, it is what it is. Like, he knew that was just going to be the end, like nature was going to win out in the end. But I guess maybe he was also hoping maybe things would play out differently. I mean, one of his subjects, the one that he's been studying the longest for like 7 years, that the one that was kind of the disassembled body, like, I guess it finally rotted and completely died. Because that's something we've never really covered in this series either. Like, how long can the dead walk before they eventually stop functioning altogether? You know? Because that one had been isolated for like 7 years. So it's like, did it take 7 years just for it to die? Like, if it doesn't get a consistent enough supply of food, or had it been getting stuff from time to, like, how long before the dead starve? Because maybe it's been getting small animals little by little. I mean, because to be fair, it is rotting away. Like, he had like isolated its arm and stuff like that after like it fallen off. So it could just be like, right, the body's like rot to the point that it's even like, at least eating stuff would probably sustain it enough that its body doesn't completely fall apart. But I don't know if that's just like, oh, something else or someone else did that to it. The fact is, like I said, he came over, he wrapped up its arm and took it away, I guess, to keep studying it. But yeah, eventually that subject in particular, like, just finally stopped functioning. But yeah, he comes across the scene, and it seems like Amy's entire community is gone. I guess like the herd was on its way and they just couldn't do anything about it. We just don't know. Maybe Hannah got infected, and when she came back and it spread from there, or because we see a wound on Amy's neck later, so I don't know if she did get bit. And because we do see that Everett did watch what had happened, and he probably could have helped, but it's like, I guess Amy didn't get there in time to warn them or whatever. Because she had said, like, right, they were working with headhunters, so I guess, like, her and Amy, I mean, I guess, like, Hannah and Amy, like, were part of maybe, like, a small community, and the other people there were just the headhunters, because there was that person in the truck who was, like, became Specimen 42. There was, like, a whole bunch of, dead heads in the back, because they're supposed to be, like, a deterrent, I guess, obviously on the outside of the dead sector, but it's hard to say how much of that was Amy's community, how much was like headhunters, was a split. It's probably more so her community, like why things went so tits up. I mean, I guess it's just, once again, it's just nature. It is sad that this, like I said, this story just plays out the way it does. Because like the moment he came across that, you see all those all those people who turn, you're like, yeah, there's no way Amy made it through this. You're hopeful, like, oh, maybe she was able to hide away or something, but it's like, no. And you could tell at the very end how much of an effect it had on Everett seeing Amy, because he's about to tag her as like his new, I think, subject 21, but he feels bad about it because he legitimately liked her and saw the promise in her, and like the first person he had gotten attached to in so long. It's like, just as he lost subject 21, I guess she's supposed to be his new subject 21, or whatever the case may be, but you can see that look on his face where it's just like, it finally like kind of, that time with Amy did affect him. Now, what that means for him going forward, will he double down going forward and be like, yeah, I'm still all about my research, or will his experience with Amy change him going forward and he'll do things differently going forward? The next time like a group comes here, he's going to be a little bit different in case he ever runs into another Amy. I don't know which that would do. Will it make him fall back into his old habits before she showed up, or will he be more so like a, no, I'm going to be different this time? Like, this experience has changed him. It had an effect. We just don't know in which way this the pendulum was going to swing for that character. So it's just very tragic situation to play out. And like I said, I guess it's that argument that in some capacity nature will always come out on top in some shape or form, if you don't kind of learn to kind of survive it. But also it's just like, yeah, but you could have helped out a lot more if you hadn't kept that information from Amy. She could have gotten back to her people. Like, you didn't point her in the right direction. You didn't want to interfere, so you didn't let her people know, like, hey, you need to move. You could have told her, like, hey, you're in a migration pattern. Your people are located in the migration, because she's known for a while. He just never said anything to Amy, and all that time they spent together, you know, because once again, she was the only one he started to care about. He didn't really have a connection with anyone else. So that's, you know, once again, that's that selfishness of, you know, and probably a lot of the points she made of, hey, like, you are hypocritical. You want to change the rules to bend them to what suits your needs and what your wants. So, like I said, I'm just so curious what that would mean for his character going forward. So, like I said, very sad ending in some regards. Like I said, I just so curious what Everett would take away from it. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.